We're ready? Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome. This is the Governance Risk and Audit Committee meeting on Tuesday, 29th of September, 12:30. Thank you for everyone that's attending. I think everybody knows everybody. Faye, you may want to introduce your colleague, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have a new internal audit trainee, Erica. I'd like to welcome her to the team. She started with us in July.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we've got a very long agenda. There are one or two order changes, which if you bear with me, we will do it as we go along. It's because a couple of our colleagues have got to get away earlier. They're going off to collect a rather large award. I'm preempting that. You will collect it. So we will need to let them go. Okay, but we'll start with the agenda as it is. Item number 1, apologies and absence.
Yeah, we have apologies from councillors Harry Blathwaite, Saul Penfold and Pierre Bouskofer.
And substitutes?
Yeah, we have Paul Hardwick and Liz Withington.
Thank you very much and welcome. Any public questions?
None received.
Any items of urgent business?
Again, none received.
Any declarations of interest from anybody? The papers are in the folder. We now know them all off by heart. So we know what we have to declare. Okay, thank you for that. Right, item 6 is the minutes of the meeting of the 15th of June, which I have in front of me. Page 1, if anybody has any comments, please. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Where is he? Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. And just turn over page 10. Any comments? Anybody? Are we happy to accept those minutes? Thank you. Sign those. That's down there from there. Okay, the first item we're going to deal with is item number 9, which is the draft statement of accounts. Which I think is Lucy, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So yes, just pleased to present to you the draft statement of accounts covering the 2021 financial year. A very long document that takes the finance team and other managers an awful long time to put together. So I'd just like to extend my thanks to them for all their hard work and help in bringing this to you. The official deadline for having to get these published and on the website was the 31st of July this year. I'm pleased to say they were ready and on the website on the afternoon of Friday, the 30th. So we're all compliant with the statutory deadlines there. We were expecting some sort of changes to the accounts this year in terms of accounting standards to do with the adoption of the new international financial reporting standard governing leases. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, SIPFA did delay this by a year. So there have been no significant changes in accounting policies. One of the, I guess, the significant change to make you aware of is around note 41 to the accounts, which is material unusual items of income and expense, which talks about the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the accounts. Particularly, there's some large figures in there, predominantly around collection fund movements and also the effects of the business grants. We wanted to make users of the accounts aware as to why those changes had happened. So that's really the main change to draw your attention to. Unfortunately, I don't have a date to give you for the audit of these accounts. We are expecting the audit for 2019-20 accounts to commence on the 6th of December this year. and the 2021 audit will follow that. Once I have a date of an advised to me, I will make you aware. I'm happy to take questions on the document. Alternatively, at a later date, if you wish to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lucy, if I may, on page 77, it says down there that we've been a significant increase in the amount of money in our funds due to government grants, but it says also, I believe, what element of that is due to be repaid, or is that actually money that we've actually still got that we're expecting to pay out? Because I thought most of it had already been paid out now.
Yes, it has. I think obviously as well, this position was as at the 31st of March 2021. So there was still some ongoing business grants at that point. But yes, there is very little in terms to pay back to central government. At the moment, there are some ring fence funds within there that have come from the county council, which we would be obliged to pay back if we don't make use of them. But in terms of the business grants, yes, they're now largely defrayed. So there'd be only a very small amount to pay back. I think it's worth noting that the central government did do a kind of a rough calculation of how much they expected us to give out in terms of business grants. And with the view to giving us the cash we could give out, and then there was this reconciliation process to take place afterwards. So the fact that we have stuff to pay back is not necessarily a problem. It just means that we didn't have as many eligible businesses as the government first thought when they gave us the money. So yes, to date, I think the things that we needed to pay back from that grant scheme has now been paid back.
Just remind you to turn your mic on, John. Apologies.
Sorry. Yes, thank you. And thank you very much, Lucy. Yes, we are just asked to note as a committee to note this report. So thank you for that. The next item we'll go is item 11, which is the corporate governance and the code of corporates, local code. This is Duncan, I believe, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Yes, before you've got the annual governance statement and the local code of corporate governance. So these sit alongside the statement of accounts. For those of you that didn't attend or weren't able to attend the training earlier on, it's a statutory document that supports the accounts. It really gives you more information about our governance structures and the structure surrounding the statement of accounts and the control environment in which they're pulled together and in which the transactions take place. So there are a number of officers that have to do returns each year that feed into this. So the chief executive, myself as 151 officer, monitoring officer, the directors and the assistant directors. And it's also informed by the head of internal audit. So you'll see at the end of the annual governance statement that there is an improvement plan. So we're continually reviewing our internal controls and our governance to make sure it's as effective as possible. And part of this process each year is to identify areas where we could further strengthen it. So you will see an improvement plan with officers assigned to that and timescales. You'll probably note that some of those timescales have already passed, but those improvements have been put in place already. The local code is best practice, so it's not something we have to do as an authority, but as it's recommended from SIPFA, it is something we have introduced since 2016-17. And again, it highlights the areas of our control environment and helps to explain how they all interlink and what policies and procedures we have in place to support our governance arrangements. So I won't say any more about it at the moment, but I'm happy to take questions if anyone's got any. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Can I just first of all raise on page 196, the annual governance statement, the target dates Are you comfortable that these dates will be achieved as the target? And
Yeah.
how much leeway would you say is reasonable to allow these?
So just touching on that, so that first one that's allocated to myself, I've already taken those procurement improvements through full council, so they are agreed and achieved. The team planning is, as we speak, being finalised, so that's got a deadline of the end of October. The whistleblowing policy is on this agenda. The Employment and Appeals Committee was taken through full council at the last meeting. So yes, the majority of those already have been implemented. So I think those and the other timescales are for the back end of December and March. So I think they are achievable, Chair, yes.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any issues to raise? Any comments? Okay, I think we can probably move on. We're asked to review this, which we have done, and then approve. So we need a vote. We need a proposer and a seconder. Proposer, please. Or seconder, Christopher. And show of hands, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, next one is item 14. This is the local government ombudsman's letter. I think we're going to ask Duncan, are you able to handle this for us as Mr. Blatchford is available at the moment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's really just to make the committee aware of the annual review that the Ombudsman undertakes. So you'll be aware that we have, as part of our complaints procedure, a process whereby we have a 3-stage complaint system. And if we're not able to satisfy the complaint within that process, there is an opportunity then for individuals to go to the Ombudsman. So they will then review any cases that are sent to them and will rule either for or against that applicant. You'll see from this letter, so on page 257, I think it's a very positive position for the council to be in, because there were no complaints investigated that were upheld. So again, I don't need to say any more about that report, really. I just think that's a positive position for us to be in, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does anybody have any comments on that? No one would say it's comforting to see it in that area than any other situation. So that's fine. So we're asked to review this, which we've done, and just note. Okay, thank you very much. The next item is number 15, please. Sorry, this is a bit over the place, but we'll get there. The draft procurement strategy. And again, I think this one's with you, Duncan.
Thank you, Chair.
And Eric as well, I believe, is he?
Yeah, so you've got the draft procurement strategy in front of you, which you're asked to consider and recommend to Cabinet for approval. It has been updated following the COVID pandemic. It is also focusing around strengthening our environmental credentials as an authority. So it is trying to improve our procurement processes in terms of that area, and also indeed social benefit and wider social benefit that we can drive through our procurement processes. The strategy hasn't been updated for a number of years, so it's timely off the back of COVID. We had an audit recommendation that it should be updated as well. So the draft is here for your consideration today. Again, there's not much more I need to say about it, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody make a comment? Anything from there? Eric, did you want any comment on it?
No, Chairman, this goes to Cabinet on Monday. It's come here first. If this committee had any particular comments on it, Duncan set out to you the main reasons for updating it. There's more emphasis on awarding contracts that are sensitive to our environmental policies and the issues around it. So there's nothing more I wish to add.
Okay, thank you. So we are asked to recommend approval to Cabinet. We need a vote on that.
Yeah, with the proposer and seconder, please.
Proposer on that, please. Peter, seconder. Paul. And show of hands, please. No, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. The next one is item 17, which is the risk register. Oh, there it is. Right. This, I believe, is Lucy, please. Oh, Duncan, I don't mind. Get your assistant.
This is the last one from me, I promised.
If you want your assistant to do it, that's fine.
So you've got in front of you this afternoon the update to the corporate risk register. I've produced a summary at the start of the report, and we are now able to produce these reports direct from InPhase, so that's really positive. I've spoken to the committee before about the InPhase risk module that we have now. So it's a much better system. Previously, we were using spreadsheets, and that's not ideal. So when officers go in and update the system now, those updates are live. So that's a good position for us to be in. And once all those updates are made, and I've done this summary, we can then press a button to generate the report, which again is far more efficient than the previous process we had in place. So we've got our key corporate risk areas. As I've mentioned, there is a summary at the front of the report, which does highlight some of the key issues we're facing at the moment. I think one of the significant ones is in terms of procurement, which I mentioned earlier during the training. We are seeing increases in the construction industry of around 20% at the moment. And that's for a number of reasons. It's off the back of COVID, it's availability of labour, there are Brexit impacts, global forest fires are impacting on the price of timber. So we are seeing increasing construction costs. So it's just something we need to keep an eye on as an authority as we go through our next capital cycle, which we're working on at the moment. And as we're trying to procure and let those contracts, and we do always have a bit of an issue within the district in terms of attracting contractors as well sometimes for some of our projects. So it's just something worth flagging so members are aware. And in terms of our estimates, when we come to do the budget, we will just need to be cognizant of that potential impact and those rising costs. So yes, again, the report's before you. There is a summary there for you to consider, but there's nothing else I want to raise with the committee at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much. You mentioned about and I think we're all aware the prices seem to be moving upwards rather than downwards, and we have to be aware of that. We have a contract. I mean, at some point, at what point do you have to come back and say, look, this is becoming, I need more approval, or this is excessive on any of the, nothing specific, but there's got to be some sort of point where you need a further clarification, presumably, to take it forward.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It depends in which point of the procurement process you're at. So there might be some contracts that are already let where the price is fixed, and if the market is moving upwards, actually that's the contractor's risk. What we try to do, though, is work with our contractors, because we need to support those local businesses. And as a local authority, we don't necessarily want to turn around and say, well, all of that risk is with you. So we would always try and take a balanced approach. If a contract has significantly increased from the point at which we let it, in terms of it increasing over the budget envelope, then depending on how much that was, we would potentially need to bring it back to committee to get a further increase in the budget. There'll be some contracts that are let where this won't impact. And there'll be other contracts. I think the main issue for us to keep an eye on is the future procurement we do. So if we were estimating that a build might cost us £100,000 now, we just need to be aware that actually in a couple of months' time, it might be 120,000 rather than 100. So we'd address it at that point, but it's really just about having an eye on that. And I think the prevailing view is that will adjust itself, so those prices will come down, but it's not really clear yet how quickly that might happen. So that might still be the position for the next 6 months or so.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that, because obviously there's some resilience, but I mean, as you say, at some point it may be that we'd have to withdraw or completely renegotiate, put it on hold or whatever. Let's hope we don't get to that point. Sorry, has anybody else got any other comment on the risk register? Christopher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Duncan, can I look at page 284 where it looks at risk operational status? And we've got a red rating there of what's red rating, and it's a target is 4, and we've got a score of 16. So I'm assuming that's not very good. Reading the text there, it says we have considerable issues with additional workloads brought about by COVID. And I'm assuming now that, oh, well, can you confirm that we are getting through that COVID peak? And when would we expect to see that go to a green status? And are there any specific actions that are being taken by the leadership team in order to get that back to sort of a green status?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In terms of the COVID position, it's something that we are now moving through. I think the impact for COVID has been in terms of some of that redirection and reprioritization of staff. So some of those schemes we've already touched briefly on in terms of things like the business grants processes. So we've now issued £126 million of those grants without any additional resource. But what that has meant is that in some of those teams and some of those areas, the day job, if you like, has suffered because of having to focus on those areas. In terms of the leadership team, we have supported across a number of areas now with some fixed term resource. So that's not increasing the base budget. So when I talk about fixed term, it's potentially a 2-year fixed term contract. So that's only in position for a couple of years to get us over this peak and to try and get us back to a normal position. And you'll also be aware, Councillor Cushing, that we've recently gone through another process with apprentices as well. So we are trying to bolster and support a number of those teams. Things like the business grants now, although we have got a brand new scheme that's just been released, that's very much from my position, as far as I can see in the landscape in the future, running down now. So there aren't going to be, touch wood, those big schemes again, because hopefully the country will remain open and we won't go into a further lockdown. So I would anticipate over the coming months that will start to recover. We have put a number of things in place to try and support, but I think we do just need to be aware of that impact in terms of some of that reprioritisation, refocusing of staff in different areas. It has led to some operational delays, but we are working to address all of that.
If I may, so do you feel at the moment we are now sort of back to normal, or getting close to being back to normal in terms of?
I think we're getting close to getting back to normal. Like I say, I think the challenge at the moment is trying now to get back on top of some of that work that we weren't able to complete while we were really dealing with the most significant issues around COVID. And there's lots of things that the administration is trying to progress at the moment, and the leadership team is trying to progress that, again, are absolutely the right things to do, but take capacity. So just for example, Lucy's been working incredibly hard on the zero-based budgeting. That's something as an authority we've never done before, and it is more time consuming than just rolling out your normal budget process. So we are still trying to progress those initiatives despite some of the other challenges and pressures we have, because it's absolutely the right thing to do. So I think we need to be aware of that as well. So it's not just trying to get back to normal, and we're doing team planning as well. So they go hand in hand, the team planning and the zero-based budgeting. But I think Lucy will be the first to tell the committee, if you've not done the training, how resource intensive it is to actually do that piece of work. But it's the right thing to do, so we are doing it now. It would be easy to make excuses to keep pushing that back, but we haven't done that.
Anybody else? Any other comments for Duncan on the corporate risk register? We are asked to review and note the content of this, so done. Thank you. Okay, next item is item 18. A word of caution on 18, if you should have some purple papers which lists the assets. If you wish to go into any of those and want a reference to any of them marked, we will have to exclude under the Local Government Act 972, members of the public, etc. So if we can keep it to an open discussion without actually being too specific on anything, I think we can probably be okay with that, Matt, yeah? Because I think to stop the record and start again is quite a focus. Okay, so for your sake, Matt, we'll keep it simple. Okay, so the asset register. Lucy, I believe you're going to handle this. First of all, I would say that this committee did request this. It's something we had asked for, and I do appreciate that it has taken a little bit of extra work unloaded on top of everything else, but we do appreciate it, and I think it will give everybody, maybe not now, but it's one of those documents we can read, we can look at. And if there is anything that is really outstanding and you wonder what it means, I'm sure Lucy would appreciate if you just contact her direct with the reference number. I'm sure she can come back to us. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, apologies, this has taken a little while to get to you. So I know you did request this some time ago. I think it's fair to say this review is kind of a work in progress, really. And what I'm interested to get your feedback today is if there's any other information that you think would be useful to you to kind of your work in reviewing these assets, then please let me know and we can look to include it. So without naming anything specific, so we'll need to go into private business. You will see the list of assets before you, along with current valuations, valuation dates, etc., and what kind of use we hold these assets for, and what class they are in. So you can sort of cross-reference that back to the statement of accounts draft, which was elsewhere on the agenda. So clearly one thing we will have to look at with these assets is what the best use of them is, and whether that's a service use or if we keep them for investment, or if neither of those things are applicable, whether we actually do look to sell those. And there's lots of various bits of information that we would look at when coming to make that decision. But yeah, so the data as we have at the moment is in the exempt appendix A. I'm happy to take sort of any questions on that. And also, as I said, if there's any feedback you want to give me in terms of extra information that you want to see to make that more useful, then I'm happy to take that as well. Thank you, Chair.
First question I have is on page 311. It's quite comforting to see that we have a community assets, which is quite high, that we are virtually allowing the community use of free asset by us. It may be that we can't do much else with it, but the point is it's marked down as a community asset. I presume that means it's protected from anyone trying to purchase it from us, false purchase or anything, or can the community come back and say they want to buy it? Is that a feasibility?
There's nothing to specifically in law protect something that we designate as a community asset from being sold. I think it would be looked at on an asset by asset basis. So if we were approached by a section of the community wishing to purchase it, then one of the things we would certainly look at is how they would intend to preserve its community use. As I sort of said earlier, not everything that we hold as an asset generates us a return. Some of the things as a local authority that we hold is because it has a service benefit or a community benefit. So we would look to make sure that that benefit was continued if it went into ownership other than staying with ourselves.
Can I just clarify a little bit on that point? So when it lists it here as a community asset, is that something that's got a community asset nomination on it, or is that just something we're saying we are retaining because we perceive it to be a community asset?
Yes, it's the second of those. So from a CITFA point of view, we have to designate all of our assets in a particular category, and one of those categories will have its own set of accounting policies that are related to that particular asset, and that is an accounting category only. So it doesn't carry any sort of legal weight to it in terms of what it can and can't be used for, but that is, you know, an indication that we have decided that that asset's main use is of community value.
So on this information here, it doesn't tell us which of our assets have got community asset nominations, I think they're called, aren't they, on them? I just wondered if that's a helpful thing to have, because that obviously impacts on what potential uses we can have for it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a really sensible suggestion. I will look to include that. Thank you.
How regularly do we review these assets in terms of seeing whether do they still of value to the council and the community to still hold them, or are we using them for the right purposes?
I think at the moment that's kind of done on a slightly ad hoc basis. I know that as part of the review of the asset management plan, the estates team are looking at this exact issue, and you know, as part of our moving towards a slightly more commercial way of working, one of the things that we'll be doing is reviewing some of those assets and deciding where there is sort of community or social value in keeping those or not. And if there's not, then perhaps we look to sort of remove those from our asset register. But yes, at the moment it's very much done on an asset by asset basis, and it's kind of ad hoc. If there's been issues with a particular asset, we would look at it at that point. In terms of a kind of a larger scale review, looking at everything from scratch, I think that's something that we would look to do, but we haven't really been able to resource that at this point. But it's something that's on the cards.
When I look through, I won't name any, but if you look through the list, there's some there which have no asset value or very little land value. Is that simply because they haven't been valued, not that they don't have any?
So it depends on the what type of asset it is. So if we look at the ones that are kind of community-based assets, a lot of those have got incredibly low value, and that's because when the valuers last looked at them, they decided that community use value was low. So all of these assets have been valued at some point. It should be done on a kind of a 5-yearly cycle. With some of those community assets, we'd look to do that slightly longer on the basis that they're only valued at £1. So it's not going to, you know, cause huge problems to the accounts if it's not done any more quickly than that. But it depends on the type of asset and what it's used for as to what the valuation actually is. So if it's designated as an assets held for sale, then it would be kind of potentially market value that we'd look to value that at. If it was something that was more in the kind of other land and buildings category, then that would potentially be existing use value or existing use value for social housing. And then if it was an investment property, we value that at fair value. So all of the accounting policies are shown within the statement of accounts, and that would sort of explain a little bit more about how those are valued. But yeah, the community assets generally, because they don't have an economic value other than an arbitrary one to the community, those tend to be valued at very low. Not representative of what we would potentially get if we wished to sell that, for example.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question, really. And there's a heading of surplus assets, often, I presume, very small parcels of land. Are there schemes to look at whether those are worth disposing of, or whether some other use could be made of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So that definition of surplus assets is quite specific in terms of when SIPFA tell us we can use it or not. And you can designate something as surplus when you're not using it for a particular service purpose. So yeah, absolutely. So they do tend to be kind of parcels of land. Some of those in the past we have made a decision to sell, and we have transferred those to the assets held for sale class and then sold them on. So it would be very much a case of looking at each individual piece and thinking, is there a value other than to the community of keeping it? And if there isn't, if there's development potential, for example, and we would look to sell that on. What would usually happen is at the point we decided to sell it and transfer it into assets held for sale, it would get revalued. So the valuation basis would be much more along the lines of what we might expect to sell it for. So that would be done at that point. But yes, those again, I think will be sort of reviewed on a more of an ad hoc basis, and we've decided that there's potential alternative use for those.
Yes, I mean, I think this asset register is useful because it does set out in detail everything that belongs to us. A lot of these things are very small pieces of land. They are verges. Just looked at one or two in my own town. They are just verges. The only snag about it is that we end up having to cut the verges, and the verge next to it is done by the county council or the town council, and the residents don't understand why that part of the verge is cut and the other bit isn't. So that's the disadvantage. But I do see, as asset portfolio holder, there is small pieces of land that are being transferred out all the time. Even when we've agreed to do it, then we've got to draw up the necessary legal documents and so on. So it's not always quite as straightforward as people think. But there is an awful lot of small pieces of land there, really, which in many ways it would be better if the council just got rid of them and they went across to the towns and the parishes, and they just looked after them would be much easier, or some other community organisation. That they don't generate any income for us. They just cost us money. If something seriously goes wrong on them, we end up paying the bill. There's a lot of work involved in identifying all of these, progressing them, finding somebody to buy them, and then going through the legal process.
Thank you. Lucy, I presume it's fairly straightforward for members with the list of these assets to sort of cross-reference the potential revenue that we are currently getting from some of those assets, so that we know really their greater value to this authority is to continue keeping them, because that asset is generating more than we would get if we tried to sell it. But it would be fairly easy to cross-reference for us to do that through the budgets and through the paperwork, etc.
I'm not sure if I would say it was easy to cross-reference it, and it might be something that we could usefully look to bring into that appendix going forward. I think the one that should be relatively easy to cross-reference is the ones that are classed as investment properties, because the rate of return that is generated on those is a key performance indicator, which is within the council's performance information. But if it's those assets which generate us income through rents, for example, if they are not designated as investment properties, then we don't separately report them, as it just doesn't come up within a separate document that we have. If that is something that the committee would be interested in receiving, then if you want to recommend that's part of the appendix going forward, then I could include that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following on from that, I'm aware of an instance of land that is within the ownership of the council in my ward, where we seem to have lost the record of an existing lease on this particular land, which potentially would impact on its valuation. The question I want to ask is, in preparing this report, have we thoroughly audited the legal status of our various assets? And assets, for example, which don't make a return, where they may be subject to a lease, say a peppercorn rent, are they separately? It would seem from what you're saying that it is a separate, as it were, registration and accounting and investigation exercise. So the question I'm asking is, are all the restrictions or impacts upon the assets, real estate that we own, now up to date? And we're not in a situation where we're being embarrassed because an existing lease wasn't discovered in a timely manner. It was only after, real investigation that it was discovered. And it was quite an embarrassment to the council. It's just a general point that I'm making. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So this list that is in Appendix A is the audited list of assets that we have that make up our asset register as part of our accounts. So within the finance team, we don't hold the the leases for the leasehold assets. They're held by estates, but the valuations that are shown within the appendix do reflect any leases which are available. So one of the things that the valuers will do will look at, particularly if it's one that we get rental income from, what the lease says and what the kind of income streams versus the liability that we have around things like maintenance and repairs and stuff, and they will come up with a figure based on that. So to my knowledge, there hasn't been any issues with getting hold of those leases when the valuers have required it. As I said, that's held separately within the estates team, so I can come back to you with a fuller answer on that question, but to my knowledge, there hasn't been any other issues of that nature.
Just one point, going back to what Eric was saying about some of the strips of land that we have. I presume, do we have a separate register for what one would call the ransom strips that we do not want to dispose of?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that's the information that the estates team would hold, and I think if there are strips of land that constitute ransom strips, they would normally be shown on this register too. And I think then it's a decision for the council at a trigger point in time whether we would want to dispose. So those ransom strips can be very useful in terms of facilitating development and generating income for the council. So again, the estates team would review those with certain assets around bits of land like that and ransom strips. It's normal that you would get a developer potentially coming to you when they look at developing a piece of land. They'll do those land searches. It will flag that the council potentially owns a strip of land that would be beneficial either for them to access their site or to purchase to include within their site. So those sorts of transactions are normally driven by the market and driven externally. So we would normally get an approach from someone that's looking to develop something, because I'm aware, I think from memory, we do still have some in Fakenham, for example. But yeah, they would normally be driven by people wanting to do and undertake development.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Anything else come to light? Anybody? Eric, you okay, please?
Yeah, I mean, all I would say for local members, if they become aware of small strips of land that are not of any great value that we hold, and that there is a genuine community body or town or parish council that may be interested, then by all means approach estates. That's how often these things happen. I'm not saying we would dispose in every case. We'd have to evaluate it. If it turned out to be a ransom strip or something with potential for money or that could leave a development would be another matter. But otherwise, you know, if you identify things that could be useful, then by all means bring it to the attention of estates. And I notice Paul Heinrich's on North Walsham Town Council. There's a meeting tonight. I noticed there's an agenda item, and it's precisely that kind of small strip of land that's on the agenda for them to purchase.
Okay, if there are no other questions, then we're just asked to note the content of this. I will again thank you for the work on this. We seem to have more discussion on this subject than we've had on the previous items on the agenda. Nothing wrong with your items on the agenda. This one is just more interesting. But thank you for that. That is the sort of change of the items. We're going to go back now to the original agenda. Duncan and Lucy, I appreciate if you want to go, please, you know, and good luck for later on. Make sure you let us know. Lots of Facebook mentions, please, and everything else. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're back to item number 7 on the agenda, which is all down to the young lady on my left.
Thank you, Chair. The first report from internal audit today is agenda item 7, and that's the progress report on internal audit activity for the period 16th of June to the 20th of September 2021. So this report contains progress in delivering the agreed annual plan of work for internal audit for 21-22, and the plan itself was agreed by yourselves on the 15th of June 2021. This represents a late start. I think as previously covered in the last meeting, that's due to a range of impacts, COVID included. So today at 3.2, I'm able to report that we have completed 35 days of programmed work this year, which equates to 21% of the internal audit plan for 2021-22. This time, I don't have any final executive summaries to report to the committee. You'll see from Appendix 1 on page 18 that we have made progress on completing Q2 work. The deadline for all draft reports is 10 working days after the quarter end, so 30th of September, 10 working days after that, we should receive all of those ready to review and move to finalisation. You'll see from the first one on the list there that we, and the income report, we do have drafts ready and out with management. So making progress, a little behind where we would normally be this time of year in previous years, but facing a little bit of delay and catch up from 2020-21. So I'm more than happy at this point to hand that over to the committee if they have any questions, but this report very much is a quick update before we move on to the follow-up report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking on page, well, there's just two things. We look on page 5 and, well, 5 essentially. We've got a couple of outstanding actions there which have been due for a long while now. So we're starting 2017 and 18. Page 5 and 13, so page 25, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's the next item on the
I beg your
agenda.
pardon,
No, it's absolutely fine. We will definitely get onto that.
A bit previous, am I? Sorry.
But that's okay. You're okay to wait till.
I will
You
wait
will.
anticipation.
Calm down. You're right. You got confused like I did, right? Okay. Is there any other question on item 7? No, we're happy with that. We're just asked to note the content of that. Thank you very much. Now we'll go on to item number 8. Thank you. Faye.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sensing that we need to get onto this quickly.
You're obviously going to get a question.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So this report covers the period the 16th of June 2021 to the 20th of September as well. And this provides details of all of those audit recommendations that have not been completed within the originally agreed deadline. So the main body of the report provides a summary in each of the audit years for how many are completed, how many may still be within deadline, and those that are outstanding. Appendix 1 gives an overview of the status overall and gives a visual representation of how they're doing in terms of completing all of the recommendations. And then Appendix 2, I think, is where we'll have the majority of questions, and that relates to important or urgent recommendations that have not been completed within the deadline. And here within these appendices, we provide the recommendation, a revised due date is given, and then the latest response is included from the manager to say why they feel they were unable to complete it by the deadline. Now, I just want to highlight a couple of points that, you know, I'm well aware that the committee members would have seen a number of these recommendations before. Some of them are quite historical. I want to point out in particular that those for the project management framework and some in relation to the Cromer Sports Hub project represent more significant risks to the council. And I think we discussed last time that it's difficult to close some of these down when we haven't got working examples of the documents in practice. So I think a more pragmatic approach would be for me to go away and spend some time with the team, sit down and review the documents that they do have and see whether we have enough evidence there to verify that that recommendation is complete and bring back a summary to you for the next committee so that we can go through that in a little bit more detail. Rather than just kind of waiting for the examples to come through, I think we need a bit more of a pragmatic approach to that. So that's my proposal, and hopefully you'll be accepting of that. But if you have any questions on the specific comments from the management team around some of these outstanding actions, then me and the officers will be happy to try and answer those for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. As I intimated earlier on page 35, we do have a couple there which are really overdue. I mean, is anyone's feet to the fire to get those ones done?
Can I just note, Steve Evans, one of the directors, has joined us to provide an update on some of those long outstanding ones. So
I can see that.
He didn't know that.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of updates in relation to two that are within the environmental health area. So I haven't got the bit in front of me, but it's NN 1807. So that's about updating the processes that are used within environmental health. And this was something that we had in place a number of years ago, that when we started to implement the environmental health IT system, a number of those needed to change in order to reflect that. And actually, in many respects, the framework that the environmental health IT system worked in meant that there was flow paths within there that effectively documented or controlled what you could and couldn't do as officers. But we didn't sign it off. And what we've done in the meantime is that we've looked at, or we've acquired a system called REAMS, which is the Regulatory Information and Management System. It's basically a suite of knowledge management tools for professionals within the regulatory services such as environmental health. And it gives us access to a number of things. One of them is the REAMS library. So they basically map and document procedures with workflows for all areas of environmental health. What it means, one of the things that we struggle with as an authority or as a department in terms of procedures is you review them and then they're out of date, and the legislation changes and the guidance and the case law changes quite rapidly. So even if we were to update them as a period of time, they would be a snapshot. And although you try your best to keep up to date with them, it's almost a full-time industry in its own right. So REAMS basically map those changes, update of all of their procedures live, if you like. So they're quickly updated, meaning that our enforcement compliance and our activity is compliant with the latest guidance, and it removes that need to internally review the procedures on a cyclical basis. And those, all of those procedure notes, workflows come with supporting documentation and notice templates, legal enforcement templates, so that we are able to keep that consistency of approach that I think that the audit recommendation was seeking. And that service, the REAMS service, also gives us an opportunity to look at best practice sharing, and also ask the expert facilities where you can ask specialist questions of those within the field. So from my point of view, I'm comfortable that the system is in place in terms of the REAMS system, and that gives us a good degree of control. What isn't in place, and I think what I'll need to work with Faye on, is to make sure that we pick up into the team plans so that those are linked, so that you can see that we're using that system as our single source of the truth, if you like, around procedures and process. That's not yet done, and that's being built currently into the team plans that are being generated and signed off at the moment. So that's the update on that one, and I would hope that next time Faye comes before you, she'll be able to say that one's done and all signed off. The second one I have an update for you on is NN 1914. So that is one about the publishing of licensing registers. So we use the Northgate Assure IT system to manage all of our, it's a relational database. So it does all of our workload across environmental health, including around licensing and the application processing and issue of all the full range of licenses that we are responsible for issuing as a council. And included in that, there is the ability for a licensing register to be published on the fly, if you like. So as we are processing a license and issue it, then it updates the license. The issue that we have is that licensing system, if you like, that publishing bit is on a proprietary Northgate page. So effectively, it can be displayed on our website, but we don't have control over the data as such as that we're displaying. And also it doesn't have a consistent look and feel with the rest of our web pages. And obviously from a consistency point of view, there is a desire to control both the content and how the content is published, but also the consistent look and feel for users. Added to that, there are some issues for IT around compliance with the current connectivity standards, etc. And Sean Kelly, as Assistant Director, has previously flagged those. It would affect I will read his words for you. Just if you give me a moment whilst I flick to his thing, but it would affect our ability, our compliance ability in terms of connectivity standards with, in terms of our government compliance. So let me find it. So he says the interface is not currently standards compliant and will impact on the council's accessibility obligations and rating. So from that point of view, in terms of that ability to have information published in accessible format, that's why we're trying to push it out into a different, through our own website, because we have worked quite hard to achieve that and to maintain it. But I think in terms of the solution going forward, we have now, I've spoken to Sean today about this. He has been doing some work in the background. So effectively, the position that we currently have is that we expect to be able to publish the register on as a PDF basis to our websites. And that will mean that we should be able to do that over the next 3 to 4 weeks, because I'm conscious of the fact that the current licensing register on our system is considerably out of date. What we'll then look at doing is refreshing that update via PDF publishing on a regular basis, so they are relatively up to date, up until the point at which we're able to achieve a live, if you like, live register onto the system via the API connectors that are available through the Northgate system with in the way it interfaces with our system. Those are the two updates I have, Chair.
I think that was useful. Sorry we interrupted you again, but I think it was just worth picking up on those. Just flicking that back over to Faye. Presumably then the revised due date now looks more positive due date, if that is sufficient information that you can.
Yeah, I'm looking at the latest response and speaking to the service area. It does sound, as just said, that we've got 3 to 4 week period before that can be resolved. So that looks achievable. And hopefully next time when we come back with this report, we will see that one move off. And
I express my gratitude as well. It's clear those are, you're obviously actually working on both of those, so they're not languishing and forgotten about. So I do appreciate that. It does still leave the first one on man charges, which I assume doesn't fall in your portfolio. That falls presumably in the planning portfolio. But
I do have a response on that one, Christopher.
I do, yeah, lovely.
Apologies that the relevant officer is not able to be here, but they did provide me an email response which provides a bit more information. I'll just read it out for you now. Just find it. I say that like it should be easy, but it's not.
She's listening.
Why is it that iPads seem to hide emails when you want them? Let me just have a search for it.
Just while we're waiting for that, just a quick question for Faye. On your report, you've got responsible officer. Can we have a name?
Can do, but we normally, just
I
add in
think
the title and
I
invite them.
think the name I would find quite useful. They're writing the report. I think their name, if possible. I don't think there's any objection to that, Steve. Would they put in the names there of?
Sorry, may I just interject? I'm really sorry. I've tried to raise my hand and I'm not able to. I'd just like to say that I've recently been appointed into the role of the corporate business manager, and part of my responsibilities will be to manage the corporate delivery unit and work closely with the chief executive and Faye to improve the performance reporting, which will focus on the recording and follow-up of the internal audit recommendations with the responsible officers. So I'll be grateful for any input or feedback that you can provide on how we can present this differently and better to you. And we will be holding officers to account to make sure that for the GRAC meeting in December that these recommendations will be up to date.
I think provided it doesn't break any rules, I personally would find it quite useful to have the name of the officer rather than just the title. I think it sort of gives us a better picture. It doesn't have to be the one that presents, but someone has had to give you the information. And from my point of view, I think it would be useful.
We can certainly take that on board, John, and we'll investigate that and see if that is allowed.
Okay. Faye, will you still?
Yeah, I mean, we don't provide names, we just provide titles in all of our other reports. And I think it needs, just a little bit of confirmation that officers are happy with that as well. So we'll work on that. Thank you for the suggestion.
I have now found that email as well. So this is from the responsible officer in relation to those procedure notes for the local land charge services. So they've just basically said that they are in the process of producing those procedure notes for the local land charge service, but it's not been finalised due to the workload and resource implications. They're continuing to work on those and they plan to have a completed set by the end of the year. So hopefully, perhaps by that December meeting, you might see some progress there.
I promise, no more interruptions.
If I may just, another question, if I may. I note, Faye, what you say about the project management framework, so I won't ask any questions about that because I realise you're going to go do some more work on that. Just one question I would be interested in. How many projects are under management by North Norfolk District Council, both great and small? Do you know that, or is that information that we?
I have no idea, but I think it would be sensible to add that in the report that comes back, just so we've got an idea of the, the risk level and the risk profile when we're talking about some of these recommendations. So yeah, I'm happy to include that in the info that comes back.
You're happy, Mr. Chair, I think.
Okay with that?
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. It's a question of these due dates. They've obviously slipped and we don't understand the reasons why. It's just what level of confidence is there that we will meet the revised due dates, particularly those for December.
I am very comforted by the fact that we have Linda and we have, dedicated resource to help us in bringing these recommendations down. I think You know, we're going to get a handle on this, make sure that the data included within the in-phase system is really workable and that we can use that to request updates from officers. So it's a lot easier for them to let us know whether something is complete and what the progress is. But yes, we do have a number, and absolutely we recognise that this needs to come down in time for the December audit committee. We haven't had a huge amount of movement from June to now, so it's demonstrating that we need a bit of a refocus on closing these down. And as I said before, you know, if we are almost there, the risk is mitigated, let's close it down. Let's not just kind of leave it there on the list. I'm more than happy to have conversations with officers about that. But I think a more coordinated approach between internal audit and the CDU is really going to help drive forward completion of these actions. So I am hopeful, absolutely, that we're going to get a handle on this and bring these down in time for year end, when it's going to be really important for our annual opinion. Thank you.
Okay. You covered that, Paul?
Good job.
Liz?
I am going to take you back to what you said, Faye, about you'll be looking for evidence in documents. I just want to clarify, I mean, a lot of the particular ones referencing the project framework, I presume when we do the review of the reef, that's when you'll be looking for a lot of that evidence, because we haven't had huge numbers of projects going on that we can provide that evidence from, can we?
No, and that's exactly the trouble we're having, because the controls are in place, they have been designed appropriately, or we're going to hope that the evidence points us to that point. I'm sure it will. And the problem is verifying that it's being followed and that it is operating in practice. So I think we're going to have to evaluate what we've got, and I'll come back to you with some suggestions about whether we feel we've got enough at this stage to close it down. There may be some that are very, yes, that looks great, you know, we know this is going to be used, or it has been, or there may be some where we just need to wait a little bit. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth sitting down with the team and going through what we've got and seeing what we can do before completing them, definitely.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on that one for Faye? Okay. I'm completely lost now. Where are we? Okay, so that was, I think that was your last one, wasn't it? Item 10 is next. So the one before that, we would have done. Item 8, we just asked to note the comment on that. Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's move on. Next item is item number 10, which is the update on the whistleblowing policy. Cara, please.
Thank you. Yes, the whistleblowing policy is for review every 3 years. And so it's time for it to be reviewed. It's got a couple of changes that I'll let you know about. Just by way of a little bit of legal context, back in the 70s and 80s, there were a number of serious disasters, such as Piper Alpha, Herald of Free Enterprise, and looking at all of them together, if only the member of staff who had known something was wrong had have reported it or felt safe to report it, those disasters or financial problems could have been averted. And so then along came public concern at work, a charity, and then the Public Interest Disclosure Act as well. And our whistleblowing policy, as other organisations' whistleblowing policies, stem from this Public Interest Disclosure Act, which sets out what is a protected disclosure. So a disclosure made in the public interest about specified matters such as crime or health and safety, serious matters that could impact upon the public interest. And so we, as a local authority, not specific to public authorities, but all organisations of a decent size don't have to have a whistleblowing policy, but they should have a whistleblowing policy because it protects the organisation, the public interest, and also the individual who wants to make a protected disclosure. So that's the basis of why we have a whistleblowing policy. So looking at the changes, there's been some changes in staff in this organisation, and of course, if you've got a serious disclosure that you need to make, it to the correct person, and you may want to make it quite quickly. So it's been updated on page 179 to reflect the people in post. However, since the draft and this report coming to you, the head of internal audit now needs to have phase details. So it's requested for approval with that included. The other significant change, previously, if a member of staff were to make a disclosure to one of the responsible officers, those responsible officers are the statutory officers and the head of internal audit, and in some cases specified councillors. So I've just lost my track. So if a member of staff wanted to make a disclosure, then previously they would make it to one of those responsible officers, who would then set up a panel to consider what should happen next. And in liaising with the head of internal audit, it was considered that that was an unnecessary extra step which could potentially cause delay. So that has been removed, and it would now just be for the responsible officer to make a decision as to whether whether it is captured by as a protected disclosure under the whistleblowing legislation, and if so, what is the next best course of action? Is it something so serious that we would need to immediately contact the police, health and safety, or is it something that can be dealt with in a different way? So that is a little bit of an overview of the policy and of the main changes. The policy is attached, and of course I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. On page 179, is there a reason that the mobile number next to my name is not mine?
Oh, right.
I didn't know whether it was a secret code that.
I apologise for that.
That's okay.
That's transposed, and
077 529 274 80.
Thank you.
Thank you. Otherwise, someone else is going to get phone calls and wonder what it is. Okay, thanks for that. Any points of issue on the whistleblowing policy? Faye, have you got any comment?
Nothing from me, no.
Okay. No. Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, if I may just ask the Chief Legal Officer, to what extent do you think the provision in section 7.1 on page 168, which is the issue about untrue allegations, we know that this council has been subjected to some untrue allegations, as confirmed by an outside investigatory body, following an investigation to a certain procurement process, which everybody's aware of. What I'm concerned about here is that if an employee is worried about disciplinary action and doesn't want to blow the whistle internally, they may be instrumental in encouraging third parties, other individuals, members of the public even, from making allegations in an attempt to, as it were, protect themselves. So there's a potential for almost subversion on the part of third parties. I'm just wondering whether there is another legal mechanism for making people aware of their responsibilities when they're reporting matters which subsequently under investigation are found to be completely untrue.
I have to confess, I didn't quite follow exactly that train, but the policy itself sets out that if an allegation is made in good faith, then even if it subsequently turns out, you know, not to be exactly what the person had brought forward or what they suspected, if that wasn't correct, then if it was made in good faith, then that wouldn't be a matter for disciplinary action. I'm sorry, I don't think I quite followed the rest of what you were saying.
No, well, let me put it a different way, if I may. If an individual is worried about disciplinary action and whether their complaint is justified and in good faith, or whether they feel it's vexatious, therefore want to refer it to someone outside the council to report it to whichever investigatory body. In other words, to subvert the internal process of reporting and protection of the legislation, the act that's mentioned in the report. There isn't anything here, is there, to actually prevent that happening?
I think it's actually mentioned in the policy somewhere.
I'd be happy to learn that there is something.
A person can report it outside of the council if they have a concern, and I can't remember the exact schedule to the Act, but there are also specified bodies that in certain situations you can go directly to. Sometimes that's the police. I think there are some circumstances where it could be a member of parliament, for example. And you can't stop individuals from taking that decision. I think one of the purposes of the whistleblowing policy is to encourage members of staff, if they think they become aware of some serious wrongdoing that affects the public interest, that there is a safe way that they can report their concerns, and they will be protected, because a person can't lose their job simply from making a disclosure under the whistleblowing policy, under the legislation.
And if the complaint, sorry to labour this, Mr. Chairman, but just really for the benefit of members of staff and fellow members who we know under Section 3B are included in the definition of employees for the purpose of this policy. What is the disciplinary action at first instance on a complaint which is found subsequently to not be made in good faith? Is it the normal disciplinary action that an employee can expect to have, or is there a specific level of disciplinary action stipulated by the legislation?
No, there isn't. We would then have to follow our internal policies. If there was something which was found to be not made in good faith, vexatious, and for the wrong reasons, then that would then be contacting our HR department, for example, and begin a process that.
We know in a perfect world it shouldn't happen, but in reality we do know instances where there has been vexatious complaints. So, you know, it is, you know, something to be aware of. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Any other follow-up, any comment? Okay, well, thank you very much, guys. Very detailed, I have to say, very good indeed. We are asked to consider, which I think we've done, and we're asked to approve. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, you will need to take a vote on this one to
Proposer,
approve it.
seconder?
Yeah.
Proposer, please. Liz, seconder, Paul. And a show of hands, please. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, the next item is item number 12, which again, I think is back to you, Cara. Is the monitoring officer's report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. Take your time.
I've got that.
There's so many of them. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's mouthful.
Yes, this is the annual monitoring officer report, which I've prepared. It's not a statutory report. There's no requirement under the legislation to actually make it, but various policies of North Norfolk District Council require this notification to members annually of the current position. I present my report to you and would remind you in particular that this covers the period of the last financial year, so the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021. Clearly, for the vast majority of that time, I wasn't in post. So much of this information is taken from information and records that I've obtained during that period. I think rather than going through it page by page, it may be best to just open it to members should you have any questions.
Christopher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to ask some questions about on page 239, item F, which I appreciate has been discussed through various channels at length, but I do feel under this formal meeting, there are a number of questions that ought to be asked and put on record, if I may, with your indulgence, which I've written out. So if that's okay, I'd like to walk through those.
Yeah, if there is any names or anyone who may be able to be.
No, I don't think I'll be asking for any names.
Yeah, if there's
no, I
any,
appreciate what you're saying, so I wasn't going to go into asking any names.
any names or someone who could be identified, then we would need to go.
Yeah,
into
I
private
appreciate
session.
that. So I don't think I was going to do anything that was going to put any names in the public domain. So yeah, no, no, I don't think I'll check as I go through, make sure that no, that it's not that. No. No, okay. Well, we'll go through each one and we'll take a view then as we go, if that's okay. So the first one I'd like to do is, what do you say here? Is that there were no breaches during this year, but you make reference to the fact that there was an alleged breach in a previous, the previous year, which was the subject of a complaint by the police. So can you advise me when and how the council was informed of the alleged procurement protocol breach?
I'm just trying to think
Sorry,
how was it? Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer that question. How was the council informed of the alleged protocol
When and
breach?
how was the council informed of the alleged procurement protocol breach?
I don't have that information here, and I don't think I could answer it off the top of my head. I'm afraid.
Fair enough, but yeah, I mean, there might be some more following, Mr. Chair.
So
Okay, but I'll do that.
let me take a note, how and when.
Yeah, yeah, okay. If it helps afterwards, I can send you a copy because I have written
That
down
would-
actually.
Oh, that would probably be useful, yeah. Let's
Yeah.
see if there's any other.
Yeah, okay. Assuming that the report fell within the 2019-2020 reporting period, can you explain why it wasn't included in the 2019-2020 monitoring officers report?
I think I can answer that one.
Yep.
I think at the time of writing the previous reports, that individual wouldn't have been aware of that information.
Right. That bemuses me a little bit, Mr. Chairman, I have to say, as an answer.
You're thinking the person would have,
Well, I thought the person, I appreciate it wasn't you, but but I just thought the person certainly would have been aware of that at the time of writing the report, because
But that's
certainly there
your
were questions asked in another committee about why that didn't appear in the report.
That's my understanding, and that is my answer now. If that is incorrect or needs to be considered and changed, I will let you know. But
Okay, well, I'll add it to the
that is
questions that I will send through.
okay,
if
it
I
may
may.
be, then it can be very.
Because I suppose the following from that, if there is an explanation, then the concern is that the last monitoring officer's report was inaccurate on that basis, because that wasn't included in there, in fact, included in here, but it just, the concern is about the accuracy. I know we're going back in time,
Yeah,
but
I
previous
think
monitoring officer, I know there's a considerable debate about whether that report was accurate and whether, we were told subsequently, I think it's more on the standards committee that you were a member of, Mr. Chairman, was told that report couldn't be amended. In terms of that. Okay, I'll move on to the next question I have. While the allegations related to the breach have not been found to reach the threshold of criminality, have they been investigated at lower levels of wrongdoing outside the police remit so that disciplinary action can be considered and assurance is given that all learning points have been covered?
I think our processes were followed. There's one other comment that I have noted in this report at item K, where I've noted that it's understood that a report was made to the police who undertook an investigation relating to the previous year, 2019-2020, and during the year 2020-21, the council was updated on this investigation. No criminality was identified, and there's mention also that the auditors are yet to return their report, and any learning from those reports will be addressed as appropriate.
But I'm not aware that any investigation was undertaken, I think, off the back of that, any other than the police. Is that correct for the record?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on, Mr. Chairman, if I may, in terms of doing that. Yeah, I suppose if no lower level investigation has been done, can we explain why and whether one is planned?
I can't say any more other than our procedures have been followed.
That's all right. Okay. So I just obviously look at responses I'm getting every time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as the monitoring officer said, I think it might be that you just produce your notes.
Yeah, I think
I know that
I'll
may
probably
not-
draw a line there if I may, and if I just send another copy of it. Mr.
I
Chairman,
think
in terms
if you
of-
could, I think otherwise there's too many delay and people will start to wonder. There's
That's
nothing
fair.
sinister. I think it would be easier to get a proper
I'm happy.
written back. Are you happy with
I am
that?
happy with that, Mr. Chairman. I'll
Okay,
do
you're
that,
happy
but I'll
with that?
copy it as well.
We'll do it that way.
Yeah,
Thank you
okay,
very much for that. Okay, anybody else for the monitoring officer's report? No, I think it's very extensive, so that's exactly what we wanted to do. I think we just have to note it, which I can honestly say, I think we have done. And now we will move on to item 13. We're getting there. Which I think is the annual report. Have we done 13 already? No, this is Matt. This is you.
Yep.
Ah, yes, of course.
So this is just a report to outline the work of the committee over the past 2 previous years. We missed it last year because we were right in the middle of COVID. So this is a summary of all the work undertaken in those 2 previous years, so 19, 20 and 2021. The main things to draw your attention to, if I just find the body of the report. So the key issues, delays with external audit, obviously that's been discussed at length on various occasions. So you're well aware of that, and you're aware that there's not much we can do about that besides raise concerns. I think there's mention in there that the internal audit plan was revised, as Faye mentioned earlier, again, taking into account COVID. So that's just highlighted there. And then finally, the last issue refers to those outstanding internal recommendations, which again, we have addressed today. So really that covers all of the main issues. There's a summary there of everything that's been seen by the committee. You'll note, obviously, relating to those kind of delays with external audit, if you look at work of the committee in 2019-20, that no external audit reports were received in that year, which probably goes a long way to explain where we are now in terms of delays with auditing of final accounts. However, in terms of conclusion, the committee is you've still met your obligations, and you've done everything you can. So this summary, once approved by you, will go on to the next full council meeting to outline all of this work for wider members. Happy to take any questions.
Any comments? It's a good report, Matt. Thank you very much. Very positive. Phrases all around, as they say. Yes, I mean, certainly very, very interesting about the amount of attendance that dramatically increased. We were allowed to Zoom in for the meetings, which I think shows the members have got an interest, but it's a question of whether there's a time element and coming along to.
I think that's especially relevant today with the fuel crisis and everything like that. If obviously this is government legislation, so it's not something we can have any impact on. If in the future statutory committee meetings are allowed to implement a hybrid meeting system per se, then I think attendance will improve dramatically, because it can be a long journey for people that for a meeting that they're not necessarily required access. It's quite a small committee, obviously.
Yeah, they may just want to listen, but not necessarily contribute. But I think it really highlights that maybe more than any of the other committees, that it's really worked. And I think we're quite pleased about it. So thank you very much for that. You want us to?
Sorry, that's a council recommendation there. So essentially, you're just recommending to council to approve it. So a formal vote with the proposal and seconded.
Okay, are we happy to put it forward to full council then? Can I have a proposer, please? Peter, seconder, Paul. Show of hands, please. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Cross that off my list. Next one is item number 16. The procurement rule, the exemption, is that the one? Procurement exemption register. Yep, thank you.
When considering the recommendations in regards to procurement and procurement exemptions, it was considered that a quarterly report be brought to GRAC rather than the information just appearing in the annual monitoring officer report. And so before you are the exemptions that follow on from those in last year's monitoring officer report. So between the 1st of February 2021 and the 31st of August 2021. And you'll see there are 4 exemptions.
Interesting. Does no one else do big belly bins? No one else wants to admit to doing big belly bins. Strange manufacture. Okay, any questions? Sorry, Christopher.
Just at the first one, really. The insurance. I mean, obviously, we don't go compare anything like that for that. Seriously, I mean, are we able to? I mean, do we have? I don't know whether that's sort of specialist thing or whether that's something that you go to an insurance broker with. Obviously, that's quite a sizable sum of money. I mean, even if you get a 20 grand off of something, it's worth having. I just wondered why we. Obviously, there are specialists who look at things like that. I'm assuming in the marketplace, I'm more insurance expert and such, but I just wondered why we didn't look at that one. So page 273. First one, got the Zurich one.
Is that an annual contract? It's an annual figure, is it?
Well, all insurance has to be annual, I'm assuming, anyway. So.
I'm not aware of that extra information, just that in the exemption form, it is set out and signed that there was only one supplier, no acceptable alternative following consultation with the CFO and procurement officer.
Really?
Sort of wondering, Mr. Chairman, whether there is leeway and whether there's something you could do with other councils, something about larger group insurance policy.
I take your point and I will take that back.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, and at that point, can I just ask, do we know how much that has been adjusted from last year's?
It's a 5% increase on the previous year.
5%. Okay. But yeah, I don't think they're the only people that do insurance. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask that we seek clarification that that there will be a normal tender process for insurance the next financial year? I'd like to know that we are going to revert to normal procedures.
Yeah, I will take this back to the finance department. Just more generally, as you're aware, we've had an audit in regard to procurement procedures, looking at exemptions as well. And one of the matters that actually it didn't come from the audit, but I've decided to have quarterly meetings with the procurement officer as well prior to the GRAC meetings. And we've decided there that she is going to be contacting the contract managers of some of these bigger contracts well in advance to make sure that things are put in action very well in advance to go through and get those various tenders get the various quotes that are required. So we're putting something extra in place. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. That's good to know. As has already been said, if we can save a few thousand, that's
Oh,
a useful side.
The percentages are good.
Yes, yes.
Liz?
It was just a point of information, really. As parish council, we've had the same issue, and Zurich is the only provider.
Oh, I think the man behind you might have a word. He's going to go and make a few phone calls. Are you aware? Okay, no, I think that's it's a point, yeah, that we've sort of registered that. So because yes, it is a lot of money, and it's Christmas. I mean, someone was going to do it 20% of that, so that's a pretty huge saving. Are you okay with that, Eric? Any comments or?
No, I know what's said, and the whole point about bringing all these reports to the grant committee was so that it was quite open, you could see it, and where you had any issues or concerns, they could be raised. You've raised that today, and that was the whole point of the change. It wasn't something that was hidden behind closed doors and only came out when something was picked up after the event or in some other way, but it's open, transparent, and there.
Yeah, so it's working. That's good.
Yes, I mean, what you've done today is how it should be working.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be something that people find out about 6 months after the event.
No. Okay, so what are we? Where are we on that one? Procurement exemption. So review and note on that is all we need. Reviewed it, noted it. Thank you very much. Next is item number 19 on the agenda, I think. Yep, 19. I think this is down to Matt.
Yep, I'll just draw members' attention to the action list mainly to go through things that we're ensuring that we've kind of achieved everything we said we'd do. So you'll note there on minute number 7, Director for Resources to provide an update on the implementation of the procurement exemption audit recommendations. So we had that report today on the draft procurement strategy. So that's done. A flowchart of the exemption certificates sign-up procedure, which has just been done by the monitoring officer, and the CWP agenda to be shared with GRAC members. I remember doing that it was some months ago now, I think, way back in June or July. So they've been done. Going through, I note there on minute 8, Chief Executive to provide a response on when the Section 106 monitoring module of the uniform system will be activated. This is something I've not seen a response on this yet. It's something that Overview and Scrutiny is actively pursuing as well. To my knowledge, it's still not active. So I think we do need to see an update on that. Whether that comes to Audit Committee or Overview and Scrutiny first remains to be seen, or perhaps just an email update that goes to all members. But I can chase that up. That's everything from the action list, really. I'm happy to move on to the work programme after that, really, unless there's any questions.
Any questions on the? No, move on. Thank you.
So on the work programme, it's already been noted. I think Lucy drew attention to it today. And you're all aware of this anyway, that the external audit delays continue. We were expecting to see an EY audit plan in June, I think, and then it went to July. That meeting was cancelled. We were expecting to see it today in September. And then when we asked for that report, we were told it'd be December. So you'll see it on there for the December meeting. Just to note really that those delays continue. Everything else is fairly normal, and we should see a civil contingencies update in December. And yeah, if there's any questions on that.
I'm just wondering whether we should move the EY audit plan down to the March one. Following year, we won't get it by then, will we? Please do.
Just one small point, we've agreed now to receive the follow-up report at every meeting, so could we add it to the 8th of March as well, please, so that we can keep track of progress for outstanding audit recommendations, and also for any internal audit reports, just to have my name there, please.
Yes, of course, yeah, no problem.
Yeah. That's done. Andrew?
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Chairman, can I just ask how and when the external auditors are paid? Presumably, are they paid when the report is finalised and delivered to us, or are they paid in stage payments?
We'd need Lucy for that question.
My understanding of that, and I stand corrected, is I've asked that question several times.
All right.
We have already
I
paid.
apologise, Mr. Chairman.
No, please don't, because like you, everyone has said, well, if they haven't done it, why are we paying them? We have to pay virtually upfront, and it's paid on a rolling basis. We cannot not pay it because of the consortium that we are in. That question has been asked, but I'm sure if you drop Lucy an email, she'll be more than happy to give you chapter and verse of why we have to do that. But I believe that is correct, that we have paid it. You don't know? Okay. No, fine, thank you. Anything else for Matt on the annual work programme? Faye's added her parts onto that. Anybody, anything else? I think it's been very good. Well done, Matt. So we've done 19, we've done 20, 21. Any exclusions, anything else? I think we're there, guys. We've done it. Thank you very much indeed. Meeting closed at 2:20. We'll add on a couple of minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you for the substitutes. I do appreciate it. It's been those that enjoyed the training beforehand. Those that didn't get it, I have asked them to send you the details. I have to say it was eye-opening in some ways and quite interesting and fairly easy to follow. So I think that was good. I think we probably finished an hour before you thought. They're shopping there.